Major breaking news. The Washington Post reports ballot drop boxes not allowed in Wisconsin, state Supreme Court rules. And this goes back to 2020 when more than 500 ballot drop boxes were in place across Wisconsin. Republicans had argued that it was a violation of state law, yet they were allowed. Democrats greatly benefited from unmanned election ballot drop boxes. Republicans said, you can't do this. It was ignored. Now we're learning it is illegal in Wisconsin. Now, I'm not sure how much it matters, this declaration, because it was along party lines. 4-3 ruling. The liberal judges saying they're allowed. The conservatives saying they're not allowed. My friends, we're in a civil war. It's just not, it's not kinetic yet. It's political pressures and manipulation. And when you have courts that are overtly one faction or the other, this is what you are going to see. If the court was 4-3 Democrat Republican, you'd get the inverse ruling. And the Democrats would come out and just be like, see, look, we won. This is why I think the system is just completely broken. I will say, first and foremost, the one thing you need to do is make sure you go out and you vote. Vote in the midterms, vote in your primaries, and bring 3 of your friends. Because the only way you bypass things like this is with a massive tsunami. But let me read for you this story, and then I'd like to take you back in time. And I want to talk about 2 states that have fallen. In Wisconsin, unmanned ballot drop boxes are illegal, meaning they were illegal back then too. In Pennsylvania, the courts have now ruled that mail-in voting was unconstitutional. Remaining in place for now, 2.5 million votes unconstitutional. This is going to gut this country. But let's read this first story. Let's break it down. WAPO reports a divided Wisconsin Supreme Court barred the use of most ballot drop boxes on Friday and ruled voters could not give their completed absentee ballots to others to return on their behalf, a practice that some conservatives disparage as ballot harvesting. It's a ruling feared by voting rights proponents, who said ahead of time such a decision would make it harder for voters, particularly those with disabilities, to return their absentee ballots. I'm going to stop you right now. Well, let me read this one more sentence. Many Republicans hoped for a ruling they said would help prevent someone from casting a ballot in the name of someone else. And I can hear the left coming out and say, there's no evidence of widespread fraud, so Republicans are wrong. Well, Bill Barr said there was some fraud. Just not that much, but it happens. 2,000 mules raises many, many questions that need to be answered. But I don't care. The fact is, there's also not that high a percentage of people with disabilities. There is no reason to break the law. Wisconsin law says you can't do this. How is it even up for question? They say the 4-3 ruling came a month before the state's August 9th primaries, when voters will narrow the fields for governor and U.S. senator. Both contests in this battleground state are being closely watched nationally. For years, ballot drop boxes were used without controversy across Wisconsin. Election clerks greatly expanded their use in 2020 during the coronavirus pandemic as absentee voting hit unprecedented levels. By the time of the presidential election, more than 500 ballot drop boxes were in place across Wisconsin. Some Republicans balked at their use, pointing to a state law that says an absentee ballot must be mailed by the elector or delivered in person to the municipal clerk issuing the ballot or ballots. So if it was so blatantly illegal, how is it allowed? The state's high court on Friday ruled that means voters themselves must return absentee ballots and cannot use drop boxes. The key phrase is in person. All right. In 2020, Republicans filed a lawsuit in Pennsylvania arguing that mail-in voting was unconstitutional. A lower court agreed. They said that those filing the suit would likely win on the merits. When the lawsuit reached the Supreme Court, it was rejected on standing. They outright said, the court, you Republicans are too late. It's too late. And that's insane. The courts should not be partisan. A court should not look to a person and say, instead of taking your argument, we're going to say you're a Republican, so you get out. Crazy days indeed. I want to show you the data, but I want to start by saying this. The latest information would not have given Trump the victory. Sorry, Trump still would not have won. If we look at the results from the 2020 presidential election, Donald Trump had 232 electoral votes to Biden's 306. If Trump were to have won both Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, he would still be short with 262 electoral votes. Joe Biden still would have won. Trump would have needed one more state. And you know what? Nevada would not have cut it. Arizona or Georgia. Now, there are questions about rule changes in Arizona and Georgia. Those haven't been answered thus far, so I can only say this. I tweeted something out and then realized I was wrong quickly and took it down. If Donald Trump, if these rulings in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania stood before the election in 2020, Trump still would not have won. I want to make sure that's clear. The questions of Arizona and Georgia would need to be answered. If they get answered, we'll bring that up. But I still want to point this out. Here's Wisconsin. Trump lost Wisconsin by about 20,000 votes. That's crazy. The New York Times says, vote by mail in Wisconsin helped a liberal candidate upending old theories. Now, this story from the New York Times basically says they used to think that mail-in voting didn't have wasn't an advantage for either party. Now the data shows it's clearly an advantage for the left, for liberals, for Democrats. Again, I want to stress, one by one states are falling in terms of these lawsuits. Okay. We're not there yet. For those that want to argue that Donald Trump should have won were it not for these illegitimate or unconstitutional changes, so far, no. We'll see what happens. Maybe Carrie Lake gets nominated for the Republican primary and then gets elected governor. And then you see an investigation and some rulings, and maybe then you will have the states you need. But for the time being, no. I don't like the fraud narrative. I really, really don't. I understand 2,000 mules, but I'll put it this way. There are questions about fraud. Yeah. They should be investigated. Yes. Bill Barr said there was fraud. Right. Just not enough to have changed the outcome of the election. And I want to stress this point. When I look at this story, I agree. I know a lot of people on the right, a lot of Trump supporters don't like that, but I think you're wrong. I think the issue here was the rule changes or the shadow campaign. The fact that Republicans and Democrats together changed the rules greatly benefited Joe Biden. I believe that the ballots cast for Joe Biden were real ballots, but the rules were changed in such a way to benefit Joe Biden. This is what needs to be focused on if you want better elections. I'll give you my opinion. My opinion is that it should be harder to vote. It should be harder to vote than it is right now. You should have to get up, walk down to the polling place, and choose to vote. And that's my bare minimum. I'm not saying we need to even have voter ID. I'm saying you need to get up and go vote. It's crazy. Now, I have no problem with voter ID. I'm mostly in favor of it. Why not? Who doesn't have an ID? It's absurd that you can go and vote without proving who you are. I'm not a big fan of IDs in general, but I don't like the idea that people can just show up without proving who they are and just take a name. I don't like that. I don't like that. So I think voting should be a little bit more difficult. I don't like the idea that someone could be sitting in their house doing nothing, and then someone knocks on their door and says, fill that thing out, put it in the mailbox. It's like, dude, if that person didn't care to vote, they shouldn't vote. If someone isn't willing to get up off their butt for even a few minutes, they shouldn't vote. At the very least, they should have to walk to the mailbox with their own ballot. The New York Times outright stating the left benefits from mail-in voting. This is the point I am trying to drive home to all of the Trump supporters and the conservatives. Please listen. This is how the Democrats win. And you know it. We all know it. I don't care about anything else beyond this. If we can see in Wisconsin, these ballot drop boxes are not allowed, and you have to drop your ballot off in person, that's all you need. You got questions about 2,000 mules? Fine. That won't happen if you deal with this. So you don't need to even go any further than that. Here's Pennsylvania. An appellate court ruled Friday that Pennsylvania's mail voting law passed in 2019 with bipartisan support is unconstitutional, but it will remain in place as Governor Tom Wolf's administration pursues an appeal to the state Supreme Court. Now, the state Supreme Court, in my opinion, will probably come out and be like, no, it's fine. It'll be tough, though. We'll see. In a 3-2 decision along party lines, here we go again. The Republican judges, citing extensively from past state Supreme Court rulings, said such a change would need to be made through an amendment to the Pennsylvania Constitution, a lengthy process that would ultimately put the matter before voters. So why not? The high-stakes ruling now moves to the state Supreme Court, which is dominated by Democrats. But Bruce Ledowitz, a Duquesne University professor and a state constitutional expert, said if the high court takes the case, it will be a close legal question. Though voting rights advocates excoriated the Commonwealth Court decision Friday, Ledowitz said both sides have raised valid arguments, and he doesn't expect the high court, if it accepts the case, to rule along party lines. Generally speaking, the Supreme Court has voted in favor of expanding access. If I had to bet, which I don't, I would bet that they reverse, but it's going to be a close matter. Oh, they're going to reverse because this country is broken. So maybe Pennsylvania will crack. We can see here in the election results, Donald Trump lost by just about 80,000 votes. That's it. It's a very close race. About 80,000 votes. Take a look at this. Politico reports Democrats returned nearly 3 times as many mail-in ballots as Republicans in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has received more than 2.5 million mail-in and absentee ballots so far. With the current ruling calling into question 2.5 million mail-in ballots, still no guarantee Trump would have won. But if we go on the surface and say 2.5 million ballots would have been disqualified, okay. But if they didn't allow mail-in voting, how many of these people would have just gone and voted? A large portion. Would that leave a remainder of 80 or so thousand votes for Democrats? This is tough. Trump lost by 80,000. If you eliminate 2.5 million mail-in ballots, I'm not sure enough of them would have come out to vote. They say more than 1.6 million were from registered Democrats. 586,000 were from Republicans. Well, okay. 278,000 from independents. So you'd even lose 500,000 Republican votes. It's hard to say exactly what would have happened, but with a disparity of 1.1 million, I think it's possible Trump could have taken Pennsylvania. Here's what I say. There should be election day, one day as per the Constitution. So everyone should be aiming for that. No longer should we have extensions, 3-day, after election day with counting and all that stuff. You get one day. You vote, you count, you're done. Boom. That's it. Now, some would argue there's challenges in population expansion. I would argue that just means you need to have the precincts can't handle their votes, and it should be done. I think France was able to pull it off with no issue. I think the issue is everybody is just trying to steal power. They're trying to take power. There's a fair argument, though. Let's read the story from 2020. Pennsylvania Supreme Court rejects Republican suit to throw out ballots, arguing that Republicans should have filed sooner. I don't think their party should play into this. They say, quote, unsatisfied with the result of the wager, they would now flip over the table, scattering to the shadows the votes of millions of Pennsylvanians, Justice David Wecht wrote in a statement, concurring with the 3-page order. It is not our role to lend legitimacy to such transparent and untimely efforts to subvert the will of the Pennsylvania voters. Here's the issue. If they filed the lawsuit in advance, then those 2.5 million people could have chosen to vote in person. This would have thrown those votes out. And then what? They would not have gotten their vote. Sorry. So I don't know. I think right now we've got to do the best we can. And the best we can is this should be ruled unconstitutional. Mail-in voting for now should be kicked out. The ballot boxes in Wisconsin should be removed. And then we should take a look at Arizona where, boy, they don't stop fighting. There's a lot going on there. We should have investigations. Give all the Republicans everything they want. Give them their investigations. Otherwise, if we don't have confidence in the election, this country implodes. So I can only say it feels to me every day that Democrats want this country to melt, to explode. These people are insane. A bunch of Republicans come out screaming, saying, oh, we don't like this. Okay, give them the investigation. When Donald Trump was accused of being a Russian agent, the Democrats got the investigation. Why aren't the Republicans getting it? Oh, it's because Democrats don't play fair. Meanwhile, they claim Republicans don't play fair, and I don't even know what Republicans are doing. They're like, Republicans are obstructing us. Oh, here we go. The Democrats wanted universal health care. The Republicans said no, so the Republicans are obstructing. The Democrats want to ban all guns. Republicans said no, so, the Republicans are obstructing. When will we ever get Republicans fighting for what Republicans in this country want? Yeah, they don't do it. Now, for the most part, I'm more libertarian. I don't completely agree with a lot of what the Republicans are doing. But we have a lopsided, one-sided political system in this country. Case in point with how the election went. Republicans just cave. They're sad, sappy, pathetic, failed leaders. Man, I wonder what we'll see out of Georgia and Arizona, if anything. Because right now, there's an argument to be made that Pennsylvania, Wisconsin are in question. Arizona is potentially also in question, as there's constant infighting over what should and could be done with Arizona. But I don't know, man. I'm going to put it this way. At this point, what's done is done. First, we need to have investigations so that we can figure out why this happened, why any of it happened. We should have inquiries. We're going to need Republicans in the House to file subpoenas. At the end of this, I hope there's a resolution where Democrats and Republicans will just be like, okay, all right, let's keep with it. But if they don't allow Republicans the opportunity to vent, to investigate, and to understand, you're going to have no faith in these elections. Now, I'll warn the Republicans. I think Georgia was lost in the Senate races because tons of people felt it was pointless and it was it was so close. But you had people coming out and saying, fraud. So they're like, okay, screw it. I guess you can't win. That's insane to me. You need to go out and vote. Now, you may have concerns about fraud or unfairness and all that, but I tell you this, the one thing they cannot stop is a red wave. There is no procedural change that stops a tsunami. None. So go out and vote. It's getting close. We got Carrie Lake just on the show last night. I think she's fantastic. She's running in Arizona. I'd love to see her win. And I don't know a whole lot about what's going on in Arizona, so it doesn't say much. But I like the things that she stands for, 2A especially. Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. I don't know, man. I think we need to make sure that we're focused on what's happening here. Take a look at what happened in 2020. File your lawsuits. Win in the courts. Pennsylvania may ultimately decide that mail-in voting is allowed. And then how do you win, Republicans? What will your strategy be? Mail-in voting heavily favors Democrats, and it's extremely obvious why. Because they can knock on doors, and then someone sitting there eating Cheetos, they can be like, hey, see that thing you got in the mail? Fill it out right now. And they'll go, I don't want to. Just fill it out right now. And they'll go, fine, and they'll do it. But for Republicans, you've got to go door to door in rural areas, which could span miles. You drive to one house, knock on the door. You got to drive to another house. Meanwhile, in New York City, they just go knock, 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 knock. It's that easy. Now, Pennsylvania is where it's really important. They're going to get the votes in the urban centers much more easily with mail-in voting than you will be able to get in rural areas. And that means these swing states, they got a major urban advantage. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair that elections just favor people who live in urban settings. You know, that's the way it is. So the Republicans need to get their ground game intact. They need to start going door to door. They need to start driving around. They need to start telling people to vote. And they need to start spending money in deep blue areas. You cannot just sit back and say, we can't win, so what's the point? You need to plant the seeds of the tree whose shade you know you will never sit beneath. And then maybe in 20 years, there will be a growing conservative, libertarian, or moderate movement in many of these places. But I'll also add this. In Ocasio-Cortez's district, if every Republican voted, she would lose. That's right. If every Republican voted, AOC would lose because it's about a third to a little bit more than a third of the voters are Republican, are conservative, but they don't vote. And it's probably because Republicans don't think they can win. They tell people they can't win. People believe they can't win, so they don't try. Every single Republican needs to vote, and you will see safe blue districts flip. If Republicans can muster up zeal among their base, if they can go and convince every single Republican to vote, you would win everything. And don't look at me. I don't know why they don't do it. I don't know why they just don't do it. We hear it over and over again. The GOP won't fund any attempts at pushing their values in blue areas. That's why they're deep blue, because you've given up. I think we're going to see interesting things come out of Arizona, especially with Kari Lake. I think we're going to see interesting things come out of Georgia, potentially, but we'll see. Looks like Raffensperger and Kemp are going to be staying in. I don't know if you're going to see enough rulings that would actually have an impact on the 2020 results, because Wisconsin and Pennsylvania flipping still would not have given Trump the victory. But it's part of the battle. I think the country is broken. I think it's party line. And that's a scary prospect. But if enough people go out and vote, it will not matter. So make sure, come November or whenever your election is, you get out there, you cast your ballot. I'll leave it there. Also, see what you can do with filing lawsuits to challenge. Do what you can. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.